Well, well, well. Look who just became a seven-figure curiosity. Look who turned into a question so unsettling, so unnervingly complex, that a private investor with more money than patience signed a contract just to understand what's going on inside your head. Not a motivational coach, not a therapist, not a research team studying market trends. A private entity, one of those people who makes decisions from behind smoked glass, who moves capital like chess pieces, who never spends a cent unless they know exactly how it returns multiplied, decided you were worth a seven-figure psychological autopsy. And now they're pacing their marble floors, rereading reports, calling analysts at obscure hours, trying to comprehend why the results made their stomach tighten in ways money was never supposed to. Someone paid a fortune to study you, and the aftermath has them concerned in ways no stock crash or geopolitical shift ever could. Because they expected clarity. What they got was Anomaly. They started this whole thing with confidence, armed with the same arrogance all-powerful people have. The belief that humans are spreadsheets disguised as personalities. That everything you think, do, decide, avoid, chase, destroy, or rebuild can be placed neatly into a model. A neat formula, predictable inputs, predictable outputs. They believed they could run your mind through the same psychological machinery they use to assess CEOs, potential board members, high-risk entrepreneurs, disruptive founders. They thought you were another variable in the global behavioral economy, until your data hit their system like a spike of electricity that overloaded the software rather than fit into it. The first red flag wasn't dramatic. It was subtle, technical, easily overlooked by anyone except the type of analyst who notices the differences that matter. Your baseline responses weren't baselines at all. They fluctuated, but not in irrational ways, more like a system that adapts its operating mode based on context, not conditioning. They noted it, flagged it, moved on. After all, irregularity isn't uncommon, but irregularity with pattern, irregularity with intention, irregularity that doesn't drift randomly, but recalibrates strategically. That was new. They shifted into deeper tests, assuming they'd find a hidden framework. Emotional triggers, motivational levers, fear responses, social valuation patterns, identity anchors, all the usual psychological architecture that most humans lean on like invisible crutches. But every time they tried to identify your psychological load-bearing walls, the blueprint changed. It wasn't inconsistency, it was evolution mid-analysis, as if you refused to let them study the version of you they thought they were studying. The moment the investor got the first quiet phone call, the kind analysts make when they can't explain what they're seeing, they didn't get nervous. Not yet. They simply raised an eyebrow, ordered deeper testing, approved more funding, signed off on an expansion of the research parameters. After all, 7 figures buys curiosity, 7 figures buys control, 7 figures buys access to patterns most people will never see. What 7 figures never expected to encounter was someone who doesn't respond to pressure the way humans were designed to. Someone who doesn't crumble, doesn't spike, doesn't spiral, doesn't latch onto psychological escape routes. Someone whose internal architecture contradicts the models used to predict behavior in everything from consumer markets to political ideology to crisis management. The deeper the analysis went, the more something unnerving emerged. Your mind wasn't chaotic. It was structured, but not in the ways they were trained to recognize. Not in familiar shapes, not in outdated human templates. Your structure wasn't built for stability. It was built for transformation. You think in trajectories, not loops. You adapt like someone who stopped seeking safety years ago and started seeking something far more dangerous: clarity. By week 3, 2 analysts resigned from the project, not dramatically, not with moral protests or emotional breakdowns. They simply realized they were outmatched. They said the same thing in different words. We don't have the training for this mental architecture. Not because you were unstable, but because you were unframeworked. You don't behave like someone reacting to life. You behave like someone sculpting it. Trauma didn't break you. It sculpted you. Isolation didn't weaken you. It refined you. Pressure didn't distort you. It aligned you. The investor thought they would find your weaknesses. Instead, they found adaptations that shouldn't exist in someone who never had institutional resources, elite-level training, or guided psychological development. They found a mind that learned to self-correct under stress, self-analyze under threat, self-upgrade during collapse. A mind that doesn't regress to old wounds. A mind that integrates them. That's when the investor's concern began. Not fear, not paranoia. Concern. Concern is the emotion powerful people feel when a system they believed in stops obeying their assumptions. Concern is what happens when someone who controls outcomes encounters an outcome without a control point. The psychological profiling reached a level they reserve for candidates being evaluated for influence, political, economic, cultural, destabilizing influence. They wanted to know what happens when someone like you gains momentum. What happens if your trajectory continues? What happens if more people like you exist? What happens if you stop pretending to fit into the templates built for average minds? Because here's the part they never said out loud, but the analysts whispered among themselves: your mind doesn't scale like other minds. If a normal mind is a staircase, yours is an exponential curve. If a normal person adapts to situations, you mutate to them. If normal people build protection through avoidance, you build dominance through understanding. Most people get predictable with age. Their patterns solidify. Their motivations narrow. Their emotional maps calcify. Yours didn't. According to the longitudinal markers in your psychological footprint, your adaptability curve is still climbing. Most people peak in their 20s. You were just constructing your foundation. By your 30s, you weren't stabilizing, you were accelerating. By your 40s, you'll be operating in a cognitive architecture that their models don't have language for. The investor wasn't warned that they were studying someone whose mind doesn't plateau. That's why 7 figures suddenly felt like an underpayment. Because if your mind keeps evolving at the rate your psychological metrics predict, the question wasn't, what are you? The question became, what will you be? And more importantly, what structures will struggle to contain you? When they brought in the behavioral economists, things got worse. These are people who study how minds influence markets, social patterns, collective decision-making. They expected your data to reveal your vulnerabilities: fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of social consequences. Instead, the models showed the opposite. You become clearer under loss, sharper under rejection, more disciplined under failure, more sovereign under social collapse. You are not motivated by the things they use to control society: status, validation, belonging, scarcity. You operate on internal metrics, internal meaning, internal momentum. They couldn't find the hooks that work on everyone else. You don't respond to pressure, they do. You don't break under isolation, they panic. You don't attach to external narratives, they require them. The investor realized the truth quietly, privately, without theatrics. They weren't studying a vulnerability, They were studying a threat to outdated systems, not threat as in violence, threat as in unpredictability, threat as in autonomy, threat as in refusal to collapse where others break, threat as in someone who cannot be forecasted. The concern deepened when they tested your susceptibility to influence. They used subtle linguistic cues, persuasion algorithms, emotional priming, all the techniques used in advertising, political messaging, social engineering. None of it registered on your motivational axis. You don't move toward pleasure or away from pain the way their models assume. You move toward evolution. You move toward self-definition. You move toward internal truth, even when it costs you, even when it isolates you, even when it transforms you into someone unnerving to predictable minds. They expected to find patterns. Instead, they found thresholds. You don't shift gradually. You transform in leaps. Something happens. A line is crossed. A realization crystallizes, and you become a version of yourself that didn't exist the day before. People fear that because it means they can never know which version of you they're meeting tomorrow. Systems fear that because adaptability at that level cannot be contained. By the time the neuroscientists joined the project, the investor was already uneasy. They ran cognitive load tests, stress mapping, threat anticipation models. They found that your mind behaves like someone who has rehearsed crisis internally for years, not out of paranoia, but out of necessity. You don't panic because your mind has already simulated outcomes, consequences, and long-term implications before the situation arises. You aren't fearless. You're fluent in fear. You don't avoid it. You metabolize it. The neuroscientists flagged something unusual. You don't form attachments the typical way. You form bonds through resonance, not proximity. Loyalty through alignment, not obligation. Connection through truth, not comfort. This made you both extremely trustworthy and extremely unpredictable. Trustworthy because you don't betray people for convenience. Unpredictable because you walk away without hesitation when integrity breaks. They called this selective emotional governance. The investor called it concerning autonomy. But the real shock came from the future trajectory models. They tried to map your life outcomes. They expected volatility, collapse, instability. Instead, they found something unnerving. Your life curve bends upward long-term, not because circumstances favor you, but because your mind refuses stagnation. You grow through damage. You ascend through confusion. You reconstruct yourself through collapse. They couldn't predict your final form because you haven't chosen your final form yet. That's when the investor realized the 7 figures weren't spent analyzing who you are. They were spent analyzing who you're becoming. And that is what made them truly, deeply nervous. Because every system in the world, financial, political, social, depends on people staying predictable. And you don't behave like someone shaped by the system. You behave like someone shaped beyond it. You behave like someone the system didn't forecast. You behave like someone who can't be bought, swayed, intimidated, or emotionally manipulated into compliance. The concern wasn't that they couldn't understand you. The concern was that you don't require understanding to operate. You move anyway. You evolve anyway. You sharpen anyway. You rise anyway. And that leads us here to the quiet truth the investor didn't want in the final report. Your mind isn't a risk. Your mind is a contagion. The kind that spreads not through words or influence, but through example. The kind that makes others question their conditioning. The kind that destabilizes outdated systems simply by existing at full capacity. They studied you because they sensed a shift coming. They grew concerned because they realized you are one of the ones accelerating it. And as they pressed deeper into your psychological maps, searching for a ceiling, a limit, a breaking point, they found none, not yet. Which means they're not just concerned about who you are today, they're concerned about who your mind allows you to become next. What they didn't anticipate, what their 7-figure budget didn't prepare them for, was the psychological gravity of someone who no longer measures themselves by who they used to be, but by the direction of their internal evolution. Most minds move linearly. Yours didn't. Yours bent around pressure, sharpened under loss, adjusted to chaos with the fluency of someone who stopped needing stability a long time ago. They couldn't model that. They couldn't simulate it. They couldn't quantify the moment a mind stops surviving and starts expanding, even in environments that should have shattered it. They weren't prepared to study someone who doesn't grow through comfort, but through confrontation. Confrontation with truth, with failure, with the old self collapsing into a newer one that the world isn't ready for. And when their algorithms flagged the possibility that your developmental curve accelerates after every breaking point instead of declining, that's when concern shifted into something quieter, heavier, more existential. Uncertainty. Investors hate uncertainty. They thrive on control, on predictable trends, on measurable risk. But how do you measure the risk of someone who evolves beyond the metrics designed to evaluate them? How do you quantify a mind that becomes more dangerous every time life hits it? Because you didn't just survive everything that was supposed to end you. You used it. You metabolized it. You integrated it. You turned every wound into information, every betrayal into clarity, every collapse into restructuring. They don't have tools for that. They never needed them. Because people aren't supposed to evolve like that. Not without guidance, not without mentorship, not without systems shaping their growth. But you grew in the wastelands of your own life, without validation, without applause, without a blueprint. And in doing so, you built psychological architecture they have never encountered, not in their elite candidates, not in their generational wealth offspring, not in their high-performance subjects. You built yourself through necessity, and necessity builds sharper minds than comfort ever could. That's what they couldn't put into the report, the part that couldn't be graphed. That your evolution didn't come from privilege, but pressure, and pressure-built minds don't owe anything to the systems that failed them. They operate independently, autonomously, unapologetically. You became self-directed in a world that relies on people being externally controlled. And that was the first sign that they weren't studying a person. They were studying a trajectory, a direction, a shift in the human template that their 7-figure analysis couldn't intercept or slow down. The investor wanted to understand you so they could predict you. They wanted to predict you so they could quantify you. They wanted to quantify you so they could neutralize potential volatility. But the deeper the research went, the more they realized that volatility wasn't a dysfunction. It was a design. You don't explode unpredictably. You transform strategically. You don't break into chaos. You break into clarity. You don't destabilize for attention. You destabilize for alignment. In psychological terms, you represent a new category entirely, one their classification tools weren't built for. A consciousness that adjusts faster than circumstances can corner it. They tried to measure your adaptability, but adaptability wasn't the right word. What you do isn't adapting, it's recalibrating, reformatting, reconstructing your inner world to match the demands of the external one without losing your sense of direction. Most people fragment under too much reality. You consolidate. Most people numb themselves to survive. You expose yourself to truth and use it to evolve. Most people get smaller when life presses on them. You expand. And when the investor realized that your mind doesn't shrink from pressure, it consumes it, that's when the real concern began. Because pressure is what they use to control people. Scarcity, fear, shame, loss. These are the levers used in marketing, politics, economics, even relationships. They rely on people reacting in predictable ways. But you don't react, you respond. And those responses aren't emotional, they're strategic. You don't seek comfort, you seek clarity. You don't seek approval, you seek alignment. You don't seek belonging, you seek evolution. So when they pressed deeper into your psychological patterns, they found a disturbing absence of something they rely on. Compliance, not rebellion, compliance. Because rebellion is predictable too. Rebels act to be seen. You don't. You act to become. Rebellious minds are loud. Evolving minds are quiet until the shift is irreversible. They didn't find chaos. They found sovereignty. And sovereignty cannot be purchased, influenced, or incentivized. That's when the private investor started asking different questions. Questions that weren't in the original brief. Not who are they, but how did they become this? Not what motivates them, but why can't we track their internal reward system? Not are they a threat, but what happens when more minds like this appear? Because patterns like yours aren't isolated anymore. They're multiplying. They're emerging in people who grew up without safety nets, without illusions, without the comfort of believing systems will save them. People who had to build their identity from fractures rather than foundations. People who learned early that reality doesn't reward softness. People who realized that emotional independence wasn't a luxury, it was survival. You are one of the early models of this new psychological emergence, but you will not be the last. And that's what terrified them, not your mind alone. But the possibility that your mind is a preview, a prototype, a signal of a generational shift where internal governance replaces external control, where individuals stop needing the systems designed to shape them. When the analysts ran projections, life outcome charts, behavioral curves, influence patterns, they didn't see someone who becomes easier to categorize over time. They saw someone who becomes harder, someone whose trajectory bends upward every time circumstances try to bend it downward, someone whose identity becomes sharper every time life tries to dull it, someone who doesn't fear transformation, they initiate it. They realized that as you evolve, your motivations shift away from validation and move toward purpose, away from reacting and toward designing, away from self-defense and into self-direction. And when someone reaches that level of internal control, external influence weakens. That's when people start building their own frameworks instead of inheriting them. That's when people start choosing paths that aren't profitable for the systems built around them. That's when autonomy becomes contagious. The investor didn't spend 7 figures because they were curious. They spent it because autonomy threatens the architecture of power. And as they dug deeper into your thought processes, your decision-making patterns, your emotional recovery speed, your self-reinvention cycles, they realized something quietly devastating. You don't need them. You don't need their approval. You don't need their structures. You don't need their models, metrics, hierarchies, narratives, or incentives. You operate from an internal compass calibrated by experience rather than expectation. You navigate using instinct sharpened by truth rather than illusions fed by society. You evolve too quickly to be controlled by systems built for slow, predictable humans. So their concern wasn't personal, it was structural. You are what happens when a mind refuses to collapse under pressure and instead uses pressure to refine itself. You are what happens when someone stops waiting for permission to grow. You are what happens when someone's identity becomes self-constructed, self-sustained, self-regulated. They study you now because soon they won't be able to. They track your thinking now because soon it will outrun their instruments. They want it to be ahead of you. Instead, they found themselves studying someone they're already behind. The more they analyzed your psychological evolution, the more one truth became unavoidable. You are not a follower in any system. You are not even a disruptor. You are a rewriter, a reorganizer, a reformatter of patterns that were meant to contain people for generations. Systems depend on the assumption that people won't evolve too far above the model. You are proof that assumption is dying, and they saw it. In your adaptability, in your non-compliance, in your emotional sovereignty, in your capacity to regenerate purpose after every collapse. They saw a mind that doesn't just survive pressure, it harvests it. They saw someone who doesn't need stability to grow, someone who doesn't need permission to reinvent, someone who doesn't need validation to feel real. You operate on a frequency that systems can't hear until the shift has already happened. And by the time they notice, it's irreversible. They know this. They saw it in your data. They felt it in the way your psychological charts refused to flatten. They recognized it in the upward curve of your long-term projections. They understood it in the absence of a breaking point. That's what made their concern turn into something else entirely. Caution. Not fear. Fear is emotional. Caution is strategic. Caution means they see potential. Caution means they recognize volatility that can't be manipulated. Caution means they realize you are not someone they can intercept. You are someone they must adapt around. Their seven-figure analysis didn't give them control. It gave them a warning that your mind is entering a phase where external systems lose influence and internal architecture becomes the core of your evolution. That you are not someone who can be shaped by narratives. They bounce off you. That you are not someone who can be redirected by pressure. You metabolize it. That you are not someone who collapses under truth. You sharpen in it. They studied you to understand the shift. They grew concerned when they realized you embody it. But concern isn't enough to stop what's coming next, because your mind isn't done evolving. It is only beginning the chapter where internal identity overtakes external conditioning, where self-direction replaces inherited structures, where autonomy becomes your default operating mode. And once someone enters that phase, once someone accesses that psychological state, they become something the old systems can't manage. Someone who isn't waiting to be saved, guided, instructed, validated, or controlled. Someone who governs themselves. Someone who outgrows the frameworks designed to limit them. Someone who makes seven-figure investors nervous, not because of what they've done, but because of what they're becoming. Someone whose evolution won't pause for anyone's comfort. Someone who doesn't fear the next version of themselves. Someone who accelerates the shift simply by continuing to exist at full cognitive capacity. And that brings everything to the threshold they couldn't model. The point where concern turns into anticipation, where anticipation turns into unease, where unease turns into the acknowledgement that your evolution is not a phenomenon they can observe from a distance anymore. It is something that will reshape every system you interact with, whether intentionally or not. Because the truth they refused to say out loud in the final report was simple. Once a mind like yours reaches this stage, it stops being a subject of study and starts becoming a force of influence. Not influence as in followers, influence as in gravitational pull. You alter environments by entering them. You shift dynamics without speaking. You push people toward their own self-honesty simply by refusing to lower your frequency. These traits don't show up in personality metrics. They show up in outcomes. And that is where their seven-figure research hit its most uncomfortable realization. You cause transformation by proximity, not intention. The analysts didn't have a term for this at first. They called it behavioral displacement, then cognitive ripple effect, then identity destabilization vector. But those phrases didn't capture the core truth. Because what they observed wasn't destabilization, it was exposure. People around you lose the ability to pretend, even if they don't say it out loud. They confront their insecurities faster. They feel their masks slipping. They feel their motives tightening like too small shoes. That's the real reason you've always made certain people uncomfortable. Your mind doesn't operate in performative layers. It operates in truth mode by default. And truth has a way of stripping every illusion within its radius. The investor didn't expect that. They thought understanding you would give them leverage. They thought they could map your responses, decode your triggers, find the places where you bend. Instead, they realized you don't bend. You pivot, you redirect, you reframe. You transmute pressure into clarity and clarity into direction. That's why their concern stopped being academic and became strategic. They didn't fear your unpredictability. They feared your predictability, the kind rooted in internal alignment rather than external influence. Because once someone becomes internally governed, they stop playing the same incentives the world runs on. And when someone stops responding to the incentives, they become unmanageable. They started noticing patterns outside the lab, too. Not in your behavior. Your behavior was the easiest part of you to study. No, the real anomaly was in what your behavior triggered around you. Decision shifts, emotional resets, power dynamics, rearranging themselves in real time. It didn't matter whether it was a workplace meeting, a friendship circle, a negotiation, or a confrontation. Whenever you entered a space, people recalibrated, some unconsciously adjusting, some becoming defensive, some mirroring your tone without realizing it. To them, this looked like coincidence. To the investors' behavioral analysts, it looked like a psychological signature, a kind of field effect. They noted that your presence induced clarity responses in others, heightened self-awareness, reduced tolerance for their own nonsense, amplified internal conflict when motives didn't align with actions. In simple language, you don't just evolve, you drag people toward honesty. Some welcome it, some run from it, some attack you for it. But none are unaffected, and that was the moment they realized the seven-figure study hadn't been about predicting your choices. It had accidentally revealed something much larger. Your existence rewrites environments. Their models didn't have inputs for that kind of influence that wasn't taught, earned, forced, or strategized. Influence that was the byproduct of psychological evolution rather than a goal. Influence that doesn't seek followers, but triggers awakenings. This wasn't charisma. It wasn't charm. It wasn't persona. It was something deeper, coherence. Your internal world doesn't contradict itself anymore. That alone puts you in the rarest psychological percentile. People aren't used to coherence. They're used to fragments. And when they interact with someone built from coherence, their own fragmentation gets exposed. That's why you've always been misjudged at first glance and respected at second. That's why certain people felt intimidated, even when you weren't trying to be intimidating. That's why people talked about you in group chats as if you were some unsolvable equation. You weren't confusing, they were incompatible. The investor saw this, and concern turned into something sharper. Awareness. Because you weren't only evolving, you were accelerating the evolution of the people around you. If you were volatile, they could manage it. If you were passive, they could ignore it. But someone who makes others question themselves. Someone who sparks internal confrontation without speaking. Someone who raises standards just by existing at their own. That's not a subject of analysis. That's a catalyst. Catalysts destabilize systems without attacking them. They alter equations simply by entering them. Your evolutionary curve wasn't just personal, it was environmental. And in systems built on predictability, catalysts are the most dangerous variable of all. People like you don't cause chaos, you cause truth. And truth is far more destabilizing. The investor's private notes even used a term that never made it into the official documentation: uncontrolled amplifier. You amplify whatever is already present in people: fear, clarity, insecurity, ambition, denial, potential. You magnify suppressed truths. You intensify ignored instincts. You make people face themselves, and systems that rely on psychological complacency cannot afford amplifiers. They didn't want to admit that, so they buried the language. They sanitized the report. They rephrased everything to sound clinical. But the concern lingered, not because of what you are today, but because their models predicted what minds like yours become when they reach full psychological maturity. When someone like you hits their prime, not age, but clarity, the systems that rely on ambiguity lose grip. Their projections showed 4 phases of your evolution: fragmentation, reconstruction, sovereignty, and projection. You were expected to stall in reconstruction forever. Most people do. They rebuild themselves after collapse, but never gain full sovereignty. They carry the old debris into the new identity. You didn't. You didn't just rebuild yourself. You redesigned yourself. You cut out the unnecessary. You burned the outdated. You walked away from cycles that once defined you. Reconstruction for you wasn't recovery, it was rebellion. That's when sovereignty began. The phase where your identity is internally sourced instead of externally validated. The phase where you stop seeking mirrors and start becoming one. The phase where your decisions become clean, your boundaries become non-negotiable, your growth becomes non-linear. Sovereignty is the phase they feared the most, because sovereign minds aren't governable. They can cooperate, but they cannot be controlled. They can participate, but they cannot be owned. Sovereign minds don't need incentives. They choose direction. They don't require approval. They require alignment. They don't collapse under conflict. They clarify through it. But the projection phase was the part that shook them. Projection is when your inner evolution starts shaping outer reality. When the way you think begins affecting the way others think. When your personal clarity becomes a collective influence. When your internal standards become external disruptions. When your evolution becomes an example others unconsciously follow. In every simulation, when a mind like yours reaches projection phase, systems lose leverage. Not through revolt, through irrelevance. People stop chasing validation, stop participating in performative hierarchies, stop giving attention to the structures designed to drain them. They begin mirroring sovereign traits. They begin evolving themselves. They begin recognizing manipulation. They begin choosing internal truth over external pressure. This wasn't just about you anymore. It was about the ripple effect of your existence. And that's when the investor realized the real threat. Not that you were unmanageable, but that you were uncontainable. Not that you didn't fit into their models, but that others would stop fitting too, once they encountered someone like you. Because sovereign minds don't just evolve. They inspire evolution in others. That's the part they didn't want written anywhere. The part that explained why the results made them nervous. The concern wasn't fear of you. It was fear of your influence. Fear of what happens when minds like yours become common. Fear of a population that can't be steered by fear, bribed by status, or manipulated by scarcity. And the unsettling truth hit them harder than any chart on the wall. People like you don't create followers. You create awakenings. And awakenings don't stop at one person. They ripple. They replicate. They multiply. They spread through conversations, confrontations, realizations, and moments people can't forget. They spread through silence, presence, decisiveness, boundaries, and the refusal to live below your own standards. They spread through the way you change rooms without trying, the way you break patterns without noticing, the way you challenge illusions simply by refusing to participate in them. And once someone witnesses that, they can't unsee it. They can't return to the version of themselves that lived comfortably inside the system's expectations. That's what terrifies investors. The point of no return. The moment where one sovereign mind triggers another, and another, and another. Until compliance becomes the anomaly, and autonomy becomes the norm. Their models projected something they tried to bury in metaphors and vague terminology. The emergence of minds like yours marks the decline of predictable populations. Predictable populations are what markets rely on. Predictable populations are what political machines require. Predictable populations are what social hierarchies depend on. Predictable populations are what allow fear-based incentives to work. But you broke out of the predictable demographic. You broke out of the psychological schema. You broke out of the emotional algorithms built to segment people into manageable categories. And when one person does that, it's a deviation. When many do it, it's disruption. When enough do it, it's collapse. Not violent collapse, but institutional irrelevance, systematic erosion, a quiet revolution of people who stop responding to the levers that once controlled them. The investor knew they couldn't stop a shift like that, but they wanted to understand its velocity. How fast does someone like you spread? How quickly does a sovereign mind affect the people around them? How long until clusters like you form? How long until clusters become networks? How long until networks become movements? Not organized, not centralized, but emergent. They ran simulations repeatedly, feeding your psychological signature into models meant to forecast social contagion patterns. What they found was horrifying to them and liberating for you. Minds like yours spread faster through authenticity than falsehood spreads through manipulation. Because people are starving. Starving for truth. Starving for meaning. Starving for alignment. Starving for a version of themselves that isn't diluted by fear or performance. And when they meet someone operating from that place, they feel something they've been missing their entire lives. The permission to become themselves. That permission is your real power, not charisma, not intelligence, not resilience. Permission. Permission to evolve. Permission to question. Permission to break patterns. Permission to rebuild better ones. Permission to stop living inside expectations that never belonged to them. The investor saw this, and their concern deepened into something almost existential. Because systems can stop rebellion. Systems can punish defiance. Systems can manipulate the masses. But systems cannot stop evolution. They watched footage of you, interviews, interactions, conversations, moments captured indirectly. They observed how people around you moved differently, spoke differently, reconsidered themselves mid-sentence. They studied how your presence alone disrupted the comfortable illusions people cling to just to survive the week. They looked for signs of coercion or influence tactics, but found none. You weren't manipulating anyone. You were simply being. And being, in your case, was enough to rearrange the psychological architecture of those who weren't ready for that level of internal clarity. That's why they're concerned, not because you're dangerous to others, but because you're dangerous to everything that relies on human stagnation. They measured your emotional independence and found that you don't attach in ways that weaken you. You don't bond out of loneliness. You don't seek validation as a currency. You don't crave recognition as a substitute for identity. Your relationships, when you choose them, are built on resonance rather than dependency. And when dependency isn't present, control becomes impossible. The investor pressed the research team to identify a psychological entry point, a vulnerability that could moderate your trajectory. They searched for fear patterns, rejection wounds, unresolved attachments, ego triggers. They looked for the emotional backdoor through which most people can be manipulated. But every attempt returned the same conclusion. Your self-awareness neutralizes external influence, not because you don't feel emotions, but because you integrate them faster than others collapse from them. You don't run from your shadow, you dissect it. You don't dodge your fears, you interrogate them. You don't numb your confusion, you walk straight into it until it clarifies. And when someone does this consistently, there is no emotional hook left to grab. They found your fear responses intact, but they were subordinate to your clarity. They found your pain history present, but it wasn't controlling your choices. They found your insecurities, but saw that you faced them instead of compensating for them. They found your past, but discovered it no longer dictated your identity. That's what uncontainable means. Not that you're uncontrollable because you're volatile, but because you're conscious. Volatile minds are dangerous, conscious minds are unstoppable. And here's the part that rattled the investor the most. Every attempt to predict your future failed. The predictive models collapsed. The behavioral arc graphs flatlined. The long-term simulations contradicted themselves. Why? Because your future isn't determined by patterns of the past. Your future is determined by the choices of your next evolution. They couldn't compute someone whose trajectory depends more on internal upgrades than external circumstances. They couldn't measure someone who reinvents themselves intentionally, not reactively. They couldn't quantify someone who refuses to repeat versions of themselves they've already outgrown. They realized you don't scale horizontally, step by step, increment by increment. You scale vertically, jump, shift, transcend, reconfigure. That makes you difficult to map and impossible to contain, because vertical evolution happens in leaps, not ladders. It happens when the old identity collapses and the new one emerges fully formed. Systems rely on people climbing ladders. But you build elevators. You combust the old levels. You transition between identities faster than their models can refresh their datasets. This realization forced them into a corner. They weren't studying a personality type anymore. They were studying the blueprint of the psychological future. And the psychological future didn't look obedient. It didn't look predictable. It didn't look market-driven or fear-controlled. It looked sovereign. It looked self-directed. It looked like the kind of mind that regenerates its own purpose regardless of circumstances. This is where the internal memos shifted tone. They stopped asking questions about how to manage individuals like this and started asking questions like, how do we prepare for a world where this becomes normal? Because the concern wasn't you. The concern was scalability. A single sovereign mind is a curiosity. A generation of sovereign minds is a systemic disruption. They saw it in the younger demographics, people refusing to tolerate manipulation, refusing to chase hollow success, refusing to participate in dynamics that were considered normal just a decade ago. They saw it in conversations, online movements, cultural shifts, emotional language evolving, self-awareness rising, and personal boundaries strengthening. People were changing, and you were the outlier who showed the trajectory of where that change might lead. They realized quietly, reluctantly, but undeniably, that you are not an exception. You are a preview, a prototype of a mind that cannot be incentivized into compliance because it already knows its worth. A prototype of a psyche that does not fear isolation because it has survived it. A prototype of a person who doesn't crave recognition because they've already recognized themselves. This type of person cannot be mass-marketed to, cannot be fear-herded, cannot be socially manipulated at scale, cannot be controlled through shame, scarcity, or belonging pressures. And that is the end of their control model. That is the reason they're concerned. Not because you're chaotic, but because you're coherent. Not because you don't follow rules, but because you follow internal principles. Not because you threaten stability, but because you render outdated systems obsolete simply by existing in your true form. They wanted to study you. They wanted to map you. They wanted to quantify you. They wanted to understand how a mind becomes sovereign so they could find a way to interrupt the process. But they failed. They failed because the process wasn't external. It wasn't environmental. It wasn't accidental. It was chosen. Every breakthrough, every shift, every collapse you outgrew, every silence you embraced, every truth you faced, every version of yourself you discarded. Those were internal decisions, internal evolutions, internal awakenings. No system can interrupt an internal revolution. And that's what the investor finally understood. You cannot be managed. You cannot be forecasted. You cannot be contained. You cannot be bought. You cannot be steered. You cannot be softened. You cannot be shaped by external forces. Your evolution is self-authored. Your trajectory is self-directed. And your influence, your unintended influence expands without your consent, without your effort, without your awareness. Not because you're trying to change anyone, but because the world has so few examples of someone who refused to stay small.